Okay, y'all. Let's get started. So Smog is back there, and he's pretty easy to hold. So the main thing is he's right now his vision is particularly low. You'll see he has cloudy eyes, or what looks like cloudy eyes, if you hold him. So that decreases his vision just a tiny bit more sharply than usual. But if you hold him, you'll see it's incredibly patient, and so being startled, he's not very startled. So feel free to have him. And feel free to pass them around if you want. It's pretty easy to hold. So as far as the review goes, we'll be using the same structure that we've used in the past. I'll let you guide the review. You can ask questions that are on the study guide or other questions. I'll scroll to the question when you ask it so that I'm recording this as usual, so that on that recording you'll know what I'm responding to. And I'll mostly be working with the whiteboard. So yeah, I'll leave it up to you. If you have any questions. Good.
You think it's okay if we just go like step by step?
Sure, whatever.
So I just want to make sure that was on the same path for the source data and the raw data.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the source data would be the course itself and the survey.
So remember that source data is the information that the participant or whoever gives you. It's like your observations before you process it. There's also something called metadata, which is like data about the data. It basically helps you understand the context that the data was collected in. So as you're thinking about source data, think about what's being recorded in the study. So any ideas about that?
So would that be the surveys with participants' responses and their CVs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. CVs and the surveys, I think that's what you meant by surveys.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so it's the responses that the participants give to completed surveys. Yeah.
So what would be the raw data? I thought raw data was before we like transform or anything.
Yeah, so raw data, it's kind of a fine distinction between raw and source. You can think of raw as like you do a minimal amount of processing on the source data, just this very small amount. So you're not doing any major restructuring, but it's like if you have to do a little bit of work to get it into an electronic storage or whatever, that would be the raw data.
So would that be in this case like the depression once it's been reverse coded?
Yeah, depression once it's been reverse coded, and something happens to the CVs as well.
They're counting the number of posters and articles, so the CVs would be raw or source, and then numbers would be.
Yep, so some sort of program or person needs to do that counting. So the raw data might be the results from that program, or often in social sciences we have coders who extract out pieces of information. Maybe we have multiple coders. I think that's what I don't know what to specify on the problem. But the results of those coders might do. And then what would be the process data?
The CSV file with like everything, like the reverse coded, unreversed.
Yeah.
All that stuff. It's like ready for analysis.
Yeah, it's ready for analysis. You can have multiple tables that each contain different types of information. So sometimes it's handy to store the things that do not vary within people in one table, the things that do vary within another. Basically, you have multiple units of analysis in a study. You can store those separately. That's slightly more efficient. You don't have to do that. Sometimes it's just more convenient to, you're not saving much space by merging the tables together. Yeah.
I had a question about the first question on the repeated measures. I just wanted some clarification. I know that when you have repeated measures, like, you have dependents, and so that like limits your degrees of freedom, but I just wanted a little bit more clarification.
Absolutely. So, when you do a repeated measures analysis, remember you're breaking apart the data set into multiple chunks, as many chunks as you have units, businesses, or, is this a business example? Yeah. So businesses, and then you basically do a regression on the things that you extract from the units. So it's like you're reducing the data set down from 200 chunks of 2 observations each down to 100 chunks of 1 observation each. Remember too, one way to think of repeated measures analysis is as an analysis of several different scores. So you can literally think of, okay, what does the table look like on which I take different scores? You do the regression of different scores. Once you do that regression, that tells you what your degrees of freedom will be. So that's sort of big picture explanation. As applied to this question, first of all, how many observations do we have as we reduce the table down to this components? So if you think about doing this process of reducing the table count into as many chunks as you have people and extracting out pieces of information from each of those chunks. So if you think of that reduced table, how many rows will that reduced table have in the context of this problem?
100.
100. So we're breaking this up into as many chunks as you have businesses. Again, 100 businesses, that gives us 100 chunks. We fit those regressions on each of the chunks. That gives us intercepts and slopes. And you do regression on that reduced table. So let's think about one of these regressions. Let's see, we're seeing if female applicants are reduced are disadvantaged on the job market. There's a female and a male resume. So our little regressions will have an intercept and a slope for gender. When we extract those intercepts and slopes, that gives us a table with 100 rows. One of the columns is intercept. One of the columns is slope. And then in that second stage, what's the analysis that we're going to do on these intercepts and slopes?
The difference score?
So we've already got the difference score. The slope is our difference score. But what's that second stage of analysis where we're fitting some sort of model on the intercepts and slopes? It's the fixed effects, but remember we can change what this model is. So we can fit an intercept-only model, we can fit a model with an intercept and something else. What are we doing in this model? Intercept-only. We're basically taking the average of the intercepts and the average of the slopes. So our models will have one parameter, just an intercept. So getting back to the problem, how many degrees of freedom should these analyses have if they're being analyzed in the appropriate way? Yeah. 99. So just to make sure that we're following all the steps, we fit that little regression on each of the different chunks. That gave us a reduced data set. It gives us that data set will have as many rows as we have businesses with a being of this. Then we fit a model in the second stage. We don't have like something that varies between businesses. So this is just going to be an intercept-only model that takes only 1 degree of freedom. So these analyses ought to have 99 degrees of freedom. None for businesses on this one. Is that clear to everybody? So, okay, let's talk about what the objection would be specifically. So if you saw this in the paper, what objection might you raise?
It seems like they're implying there are 200 observations.
Yeah, they doubled their observations. I mean, we don't know exactly what they did, but something's definitely wrong. And if they're doing tests with 198 degrees of freedom, that's 280 degrees of freedom. They're going to be able to claim that things are significant when they're not. It's sort of a lesson here. If I remember, not many of you have had an opportunity to do reviews, but this is the kind of thing that you can look for in doing reviews. Because sometimes if you do this little, start doing a little audit based on the information that you're given, sometimes you catch, well, usually promise mistakes. So sometimes they're not. I mean, you know, people who try to cheat this happen, not terribly often. But this is the kind of thing that you can check just to make sure that things are adding up and everything. The data analysis that you
Would you just move down to the next question? I had some trouble. I don't know if I included the right rows or the right columns for the difference scores model.
Yeah. So this is a long format data set. Right. So we're restructuring this to be analyzed as different scores. So first things first, let's just think about what this random, the little regression that you're fitting on each of the chunks, what that looks like. So how many parameters does that little regression have? How many pieces of information are we extracting out on each of the chunks?
4.
I hear 2, I hear 4. What's the reason?
I thought it was 4 because it's gender, face entry, and interaction between the face gender and face entry.
Absolutely. So in order to figure this out, what you can do is you can look at this model right here, the thing in parentheses. This is pretty much literally that model that you're fitting on each of the chunks. So this model right here has an intercept, because the intercept is pretty much always there. It has an effect for gender, or a parameter estimate for gender, parameter estimate for face symmetry, and parameter estimate for fetal image. So that's one. So we're going to be taking these subsets of 4 rows and extracting out 4 parameters from the 4 rows. So what we're going to want to do is take the 4 rows and squish each of those 4 rows into 1 row with 1 column per parameter, so with 4 columns. So that maybe gets you part of the way. If you're thinking about what this would look like, so each person is going to get 1 row now. Of course, we have an ID column. That stays the same. This is the ID column right here. We also get a column for each of our between subjects variables. Those are the things that are going into that second stage analysis. So do we have any between subjects variables? Yeah.
Gender is 1.
How do you know that gender is 1?
Because it's the same always for a participant, but it differs between participants.
Absolutely. So you can look at the gender column. This is the participant gender. And notice that across the 4 rows for each participant, they always have the same value. So that's something that does not vary within participants, within units. It's varies between units. So we'll also have a gender column. And as I just mentioned before, we're going to have 4 different columns, one for each of our observations, what each of the parameters that we're extracting out. So we'll have a column for intercept, a column for face gender.
Would that be the face gender slope?
Oh, yeah, that would be the slope. Actually, so you could like just go directly to the parameters that you're extracting out. But it'll be a little easier to see what we're doing if we just have one column for each of the observations that we have so that we can then use those to take the different scores. So I'm going to take, it's like I'm using spread. I'm going to write this out as if I'm using spread to create those extra columns. So I'm going to create 4 columns, one for each of these observations that each person has. So each observation is in a certain set of conditions, like male symmetric, female symmetric, male asymmetric, female asymmetric. So I'm just going to create those 4 columns: male symmetric, female symmetric, male asymmetric, female asymmetric. And in order to save space, I'm just going to say MS, FS, MA, and FA. So let's go with participant 1 right now. Participant ID 1, are they male or female? Male. What's the rating that they gave the male symmetric face?
3.
3. What's the rating that they gave the female symmetric face? 5. Male asymmetric?
2.
2. And female asymmetric? 4. Let's go with participant ID number 1. Male or female?
Yeah.
Female. Male symmetric?
4.
Or female symmetric? Male asymmetric?
3 and
3. So notice how we're taking that, what used to be one column, and we're spreading it out along rows. I could have done that in one step where I calculate the regression parameters, but it's just easier to see what's happening if I do it this way. So with the next problem, I think I asked you to calculate some of those regression parameters that you're extracting out. So how do I calculate the intercept for these two people?
You would average.
Just take the average. So I take the average of all of these. That's 6 plus 8 divided by 4.
3.5.
3.5, thank you. I'm going to write these over here. Sorry if that's a little bit confusing. So intercept 3.5. What about person ID number 2? Intercept 3.75. And we're literally just taking the average, right? How about the effect of face gender? How do I calculate that for person number 1? So I take the rows for male faces, average them together, the rows for the female faces, average them together, and take the difference. I don't remember how face gender is coded. Looks like it's not specified, so either ways would be fine. But anyway, I take the male rows for person number 1, that would be 2.5. The female rows for person number 1, that would be 4.5. 4.5 minus, yeah.
I thought to calculate this one, you did like the male minus the other male, and then divided by the female over that. Like you would be calculating it as slope.
So you are calculating slope, and in order to do that, What does the slope for face gender represent?
The difference between males and females.
The average difference between males and females. So in order to calculate the average difference, take the average among the male faces, the average among the female faces, and then take the difference.
So you wouldn't do like male symmetric minus male asymmetric over female symmetric minus.
No, that would, if you took the difference of differences, that would be the interaction.
Okay.
But that would be male symmetric minus female symmetric minus quantity male asymmetric minus female asymmetric. You can think of it as the effective gender among asymmetric faces minus the effective gender among symmetric faces. Does that make sense? There's never really a point where you need to do division in order to calculate these slopes. Maybe you're thinking changing y over changing x.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Mhm.
So x here is minus a half plus minus a half to positive half. That's how we put the gender. So the change in x is always equal to 1.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All we're doing is we're heading to y. How are we doing on this question?
Is there any sort of thing about like the ordering of the subtraction? Maybe not so much as long as you get the same across.
Yeah, technically what I should have done for this question is I should have given you a coding scheme that would have told you what to subtract from what. So if I coded face gender, females equals minus a half, and males equals positive a half, the effective gender would represent the male average minus the female average. How does rate of attractiveness change as you go from females to males?
Okay. So you do average minus average.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
How are we doing this one? So you can see there are multiple steps. This particular problem asks you to think about some data management principles too. So, you know, you can imagine that there might be some sort of multi-stage problem like this. I'm not sure if it'll be exactly like this, but it's nice to have test multiple concepts.
So for the next number 3, coming up, where the arco.
Oh, wait, real quick. On
Yes.
this one, would your table also include the interaction term?
Yes. So slope, the slope for gender, as I mentioned, would be the average among males minus the average among female faces. The slope, that's the gender slope. The slope for symmetry would be what? How would I calculate the slope for symmetry?
Slope of symmetric minus the slope of asymmetric?
Yeah, the average among asymmetric faces minus the average among symmetric faces. And then the interactions are differences of differences. So how would I calculate the interaction for this problem?
Slope one, slope minus the other slope.
Would that get you there? You can think of it as the simple effect at one level of a variable minus the simple effect at another level of a variable. So it's the among male faces, what's the effect of symmetry, and you subtract out the effect of symmetry among female faces.
So how would you?
Well, so it's the effect of symmetry among female faces minus the effect of symmetry among male faces. So what would that look like? How much do you compute that? Let's take person ID number 1. How do we calculate this for person ID number 1?
So would we use female symmetry minus male symmetry?
And specifically, what numbers would I subtract from 1?
5 minus 3.
Yes, so 5 minus 3 minus 2 minus 1. So for person ID number 1, it would be 5 minus 3, which is 2, minus 4 minus 2. This is 2 minus 2, which is 0. So that first person has no interaction. Second. Sarah. So moving on to,
Sorry.
oh, yeah, sorry.
What's the slope G again?
Oh, sorry. I was abbreviating. This is the slope for gender.
Slope for gender. And then the S.
That's the slope for symmetry. So face gender, it's the rate of effect for face gender, the rate of effect for face symmetry, the rate of effect for gender.
You said earlier that the random effects part of the model tells you what columns you add, like intercept as well as slopes.
It tells us what goes over here. Technically, I mentioned this at the time, but I backed up because it was clear this way. Technically, I could have gone directly from this data set up here to this stuff over here.
Right.
But I took this intermediate step to make sure it's what we're doing.
Gotcha. And what if we just add like face gender plus face symmetry?
Yeah, so if we had face gender plus face symmetry, if that was the model, we're not including any interaction. So all that would happen is that we don't calculate this column. Yep. You can cut a spotty if you have this out of this. Oh, where can go? I'll take them if no one else wants them. Anyway. All right.
And how do you make that, how do you calculate the slope for face gender again? No average times no average. Like, you're just looking at one participant, right? Like the first one?
Oh, yeah. So we take the average of 3 and 5 minus the average of 2 and 4. So we take the 2 rows, for all the rows that are marked male, take the average of all those, and then find all the rows that are marked female, take the average of all those.
And the same process for face symmetry.
Correct. Literally what we're doing is we're applying this mini regression model for each of these chunks of the data set. Remember I showed you could do this using LM in this kind of example. And it'll get you those parameters. So it's like we're applying the regression process for multiple times.
So we typically use the long data set for the OG or function, but then we can convert it to a wide data set to use.
Correct. As long as we are extracting as many random effects, as many regression parameters as we have rows. Other questions?
You want to do the next one?
Sure. Number 3. Okay. So let's imagine that we have this data set already calculated. How many calls to the regular linear model function do you think we would need to have in order to calculate all of the everything for, and why do you say for?
Because you have to do the intercept only model 4 times under each of the parameters.
We have 4 random effects, 4 extra columns for these created columns. And we need to do an analysis on each columns.
So for each of the 4 random effects.
And we're going to be, let me actually ask. So just ignoring the outcome for a second, what do you think is going to be the predictors in each of these calls? So remember, we're basically doing an analysis on this wide data set. It's literally what we're doing. So we have to use only the things that we find in this wide data set. Well, so we don't have, so that's, one of the, that's basically attractiveness. That's an attractiveness rule.
Oh, but it's going to be the intercept, the face, gender slope, the symmetry slope, and interaction?
Well, so those are outcomes, yeah. So those are going to be the outcomes each time. But every time we analyze one of those outcomes, it's going to be going at the tilde. So it's going to be LM, one of these outcomes. So let's say it's the interaction. Tilde, and then something has to go after the tilde. What's going after the tilde, do you think? Well, then we're going to have an intercept, for sure. Is anything else going to go after the tilde? Let me ask this a different way. What between subjects variables do we have? Gender. So for this one, gender. Okay. So what do you think is going after the tilde? Gender. So each time we do this, we're going to have gender.
Yeah, I guess this was just really unclear to me because we haven't done it in LM, because we always use Elmer, so I just really didn't know.
I thought that there were a couple of homeworks that asked you to do things like this. I admit my memory's a little bit foggy because I don't always do that most of that part of the
Yeah, I'm really wrong, but I guess it's hard to think about doing an LM after doing an Elmer.
What I'm trying to show you is that it is this 2-stage process. Like Elmer does all this for you, and in many ways I think it is more to it. I think for your regular data analysis, do it in Elmer because you don't have to fit for these models. What this can be helpful in understanding is what's happening in each of these stages. So in the first stage, you do this little computation, you actually compute each of those parameters for each of the participants. You get like 4 parameters. And then in the second stage, anything that goes in between subjects on part of the model is going to go into the model. So the between subjects part of the model, the second stage has the intercept. We're calculating an average for each of these and slope for distant gender. That's something that occurs between subjects. So on each of these things that you calculate, we're getting 2 values. An average and how the interaction varies across males versus females.
But on the board, is that supposed to be attraction instead of interaction?
No, it's interaction.
Okay.
So it's this thing that we computed up here.
Yeah. And that's just because we're working on the second step.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
In the second step, we take each of these things that we extract out from each participant, and we get that little regression from each participant. That gives us a certain number of things that we calculate, like difference scores and whatever. And in the second step, we fit a second model on each of those things that we calculated.
So we would do that like gender slope like gender aggressive, gender slope, and then slopes and like some between too.
Yes, we do this 4 times, as many times as we have parameters, random effects that we extract applications.
And then to do the intercept, would you just do one request on gender, or would you do intercept?
We'd say intercept, because it's as if we made this new data set. Well, we did make this new data set in this case. The intercept is the average for each person, and we see, we calculate an overall average across all those averages, and then how that average varies across sales or speeds.
And so this is step 2, the fixed effect?
Yes. Yes, this is step 2, the fixed effects.
If we had multiple fixed effects, would we just add them in like less?
Yeah, we could add as many things here as we want. So if we had, in addition to participant gender, we have income. If we wanted the interaction between gender and income, we put it here. We can modify this second stage however we want.
And if there was many between variables, you would just have one, right?
Correct. We could also just calculate an average across each of these 4 different things. And just to be very clear, what we're doing here is we're basically fitting all the parts of this model, except we're showing how you can do it using this conservative approach to vector scores. In practically for your own data analysis, I think it's usually easier to see what you're doing here, because you're just taking the same formula interface and adding a data effects part, just this thing out here. But this is what's happening under the hood. It's fetching this little regression as many times as you have participants or businesses or whatever. And then you have the second stage where you calculate the fixed effects. Okay.
To clarify on that model, is it gender plus the interaction at gender times? Is that a typo, or is that supposed to be?
Gender times base, no, that should be times.
It says a 3-way interaction?
Mhm.
So did we do that problem?
We did. So the way you'd get the 3-way interaction, this is a little bit more complicated. I think I showed you a case where you calculate different scores, but not multiple different scores. So we have this interaction right here, a model where we have the interaction as the outcome, and then gender as the predictor. The coefficient for gender tells you how the 2-way interaction between asymmetry and participant gender varies across, base gender varies across participant gender. That's a 3-way interaction. It's how an interaction varies with another variable.
That will.
This is more complicated than I'll show you on the test, but the model where this is the outcome, the interaction between base gender and base asymmetry is the outcome, and gender is the predictor, participant gender. So the coefficient for participant gender tells you how a 2-way interaction varies with another variable. Definition of a 3-way interaction is it's how a 2-way interaction varies across another variable. So this coefficient is actually a 3-way interaction.
So when ln parentheses, the interaction tilde gender, that's actually giving you the 3-way interaction?
It is.
Now I'm sorry, but,
No.
so the fixed effect, step 2, is actually happening is that you're regressing not attractiveness, but these like other parameters
That's right.
on your fixed effects?
That's right. So in the first stage, you get the random effects. That's the you apply that low regression as many times as you have chunks of data, so 50 times, for example, and then use those things that you calculate from each person as outcomes in and of themselves. That's the second stage. So in order to fully represent what's happening in Elmer, we actually have to do multiple things in LM. It's kind of an involved process.
So the same logic applies if you have like a three-way interaction, the random effects part, and they're all like categorical variables, like binary.
It's the same process, no matter what's over here, you're just going to get more things, more random effects for each participant. Each time you add something over there, it increases the number of things that you calculate over here. But you still go through that process, and then you have the fixed effects part. And that's what those are the regression coefficients that you get out of it. Yeah.
I would think we can move to a different question. I had one on the linear mixed effects modeling section. Under question 3, part D. Trying to understand the variance by participant intercepts with what they would do.
How did you figure out how many people were on
On the thing.
Sorry, so do we have a question before we get to part B?
How do we investigate by hand?
Sure. So we have some variability in the random intercepts, the participant intercepts. So that means if we look at this at the center of our graph at 0 on X, they're going to be somewhat spread out, those participant intercepts. The variance for condition at the participant level tells us that the slopes are also going to be different. So we're not going to have a case where the lines are all horizontal like this. Instead, they're going to be a little bit different. So some are going to be going up, some are going to be going down. The negative correlation tells us that as our slopes get more positive, our intercepts come closer together. So we're going to have something sort of like this. Notice as we move to the right of the graph, we look over here, the intercepts are closer together.
And how did you know that some of the slopes would be like this?
So you can look down each of those different numbers, and that tells you something about what's happening at a particular part of the graph. So the first thing to remember is the thing that number that you get out of the intercept line, that's going to change depending on where you are on the graph. So that tells you what's happening at 0. So that positive number tells us that it's not the case that everybody has the same intercept. If that was 0, we'd be in a situation like this. Everybody has the same intercept.
What's the standard deviation of 0?
So the standard deviation, the positive standard deviation tells us that everybody does not have the same intercept. We're in a situation like this. The fact that there's a positive standard deviation where that it's non-zero for slopes tells us that people have different slopes as well. So we're not in a situation like this. Everybody has a positive slope, or like like this, everybody has a zero slope, or like this, everybody has a negative slope. Instead, the slopes are different. So some people go up, some people go down, some people are middle, some people go up, wherever. It's all different. And then the last thing, the correlation tells us as we increase in someone's slope, what happens to the intercept. Or as we increase in the intercept, what happens to the slope. So that tells us that as the slopes increase, the intercepts decrease. So it ends up, we have a situation where as we move to the right of the graph, the intercepts start to move closer together.
Is it because of that correlation value?
Yeah.
Gotcha. So that standard deviation of the intercept, is that saying that the intercepts vary from negative 0.48 to 0.48 within that range?
It tells us, I mean, you can literally think of it as a standard deviation. So it would tell you about what 95% of the intercepts are between. But let's just assume that the fixed intercept is zero, because this tells you, how do the intercepts vary around that overall intercept. So let's assume that's zero. It tells us that, if they go about from minus 0.9 to positive 0.9, about 95% more. So about 95% would be 2 standard deviations to the right, 2 standard deviations to the left.
Yeah. So that's how you would kind of know where on the graph to draw it.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting you to be exact. I think I said that. I hope I said that. You don't have to be exact.
So on here you've got to draw separate lines representing each participant.
Yep.
But we don't know how many participants are on here.
You could just draw some number of them. It's fine. I might give you a specific number, draw 5 lines. If I give you something like this.
Wait, so I'm still confused on why you had like some positive slopes and some negative slopes. So what's the difference between what the standard deviation is telling you versus what the correlation tells you?
The correlation tells you how does the intercept change as you change the slope. The standard deviation tells you do people have about the same slope or do they have different slopes. If the standard deviation for the intercept for the slopes was 0, that means everybody has the same slope. If it's non-zero, it means we have different slopes.
Question number 2 of the next events. So both A and B is asking you salary varies within employees or businesses.
Mhm.
So to me, it seems to be the case that both is correct. Right?
Yeah, so the thing to ask yourself is if you have one employee, does that employee have the same salary across rows of the data set? We measure salary multiple times, and in fact, we're interested in what happens when salary changes. So yeah, salary varies within employees.
And between, right?
I think it's talking about just one.
Yeah, I mean, technically, if you take the thing that would vary between employees is their average salary. So you take the intercept for each employee to the intercept vary across employees. Yeah, probably.
So it's both.
It's more common to say just one. It either varies within or between. But technically, you could think about, we were just talking about these employee intercepts, the random intercepts. So you could think about how the random intercepts vary across employees. I guess it's a little bit more correct to say that the salary itself does not vary between participants, what varies between participants is like average salary or, something else that you did that little regression was regression parameters of things that vary between employees. So
That's kind of tricky.
yeah, I would just ask you to say within the two.
Okay.
It's gonna be one or the other.
Wait,
Tricky though.
so it's between in this one.
It's within.
Oh, okay.
So the thing to ask yourself again is, if you look across rows in the data set, or if you look across multiple observations for a given employee, do they have the same salary or different salary? Your salary is changing across rows.
Still kind of tricky.
Well, it's sort of, but I want you to understand attitude level. So yes, but because I'm testing my attitude level. So let's think about, I'll get to your question in just a second. Let's think about businesses. So the thing to ask yourself is, across the rows that belong to a single business, does salary vary? Or does each business have the same value for salary or so what would be the answer, do you think?
It varies within.
Yep, so if you look across rows for business, those rows have different salaries. We also know that because you can think of employees as being, nested within business, like they only belong to one business. And we just said that employee salaries vary within employees, they have to also vary within business.
So across rows for each business and across rows for each employee, salaries.
Yeah.
And so it's technically not between because the average would be listed.
Yes.
So if you asked the average salary, we would say between.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. If I calculated the average salary for each employee, and then added a row representing average salary, and then asked you, does that vary within person, within employee, or between employee? It varies between employee, and kind of know that because each person only has one average.
And employees would be a random effect as well because they vary between businesses.
Yeah, if we fit a model where we have like a categorical variable representing each employee, sure, that would vary within business. Chances are what we're going to do is we're just going to use these as two separate random effects. One, we're going to calculate some random effects for employee and some for business. So in other words, what we're going to do is when we have these parentheses, we're going to have something, then that vertical bar and employee plus something vertical bar business.
And you wouldn't do plus employee vertical bar of business as another random effect.
You don't have to, right? Other questions?
I don't think we ever got to her question, part B.
Sure.
Sorry.
So we're over here. Okay, so before the coding is minus 0.5 is the control condition, positive 0.5 is the experimental. Zero, 0.5, control, and positive 0.5 is experimental. And we discovered that the plot is going to look, it's badly drawn. It's going to look something like this. So the variance of the slopes is decreasing as we move to the right. And so what we're doing is we're changing where 0 is located So 0 used to be in the center, now it's over here, and 1 is over here. So we draw a vertical line up. Do you think that the variance in the intercepts is larger, the same, or smaller? Larger. We could just see, like, hey, the intercepts are further apart over here than they are over here.
Your intercept was in between the two conditions, and now it's at one of the conditions.
Right.
Gotcha.
I think it's easiest to see this if you actually draw it out and then change where that y-intercept is. Because you can see, oh, if I draw that y-intercept now, I just look at where each of these participant lines meets that vertical line. That tells me how much spread there is in the intercepts.
And just to clarify, if the correlation was positive, that would mean that the variance was getting larger to the right.
Other questions?
This one's kind of related to that one. Number 4 on the repeated measures. What would you expect to happen in a variation of persistent random intercepts and 2 compared to 1?
Right, so I'm giving you 2 different models. Oh, and I add something that varies between participants. So remember what we're doing, what's happening within Elmer is that we have this 2-stage process where we calculate we break apart the data set into multiple chunks, calculate the intercept and some slopes, and then we're basically doing an analysis on those intercepts and slopes. And then another thing that's happening is that when we do that second stage, we add anything that varies between subjects or between units. So the analysis might be something like, if we were to actually not use Elmer and go through these different stages, the model would look like something like this. Our outcome is intercept, tilde, gender.
Whereas before it's been tilde 1.
Correct. So based on that information, do you think the variability in the intercepts is going to decrease, increase, or stay the same if we add gender to the model? So we're looking at 2 models. One is LM intercept tilde 1. The other is intercept tilde gender.
Probably increase the variation.
As we add gender. Why do you think that?
Because now it's not just regressed on 1, it's regressed on another variable.
Well, so when we add one way to think about what adding variables does when we're using any sort of model is that it's helping us to explain variable.
Oh, then maybe it would decrease because now you're explaining more covariance.
Absolutely. Another way to think about what's happening here is I can draw 2 different graphs. In one, I've got a bunch of horizontal lines. I even showed you graphs like this where we have horizontal lines. And then I have an average line that's at the middle somewhere. And what I'm doing is the variability in the intercepts is the average difference between each of these smaller vertical lines and the one that I'm drawing in the center. But when I add gender, what I'm doing is I have those same vertical lines, but now I get to draw 2 lines, one for males and one for females. And then I take all the lines for males and I see how far they are away from the male line, all the lines for females, see how far they are from the female line. So I'm explaining difference between the line for males and the line for females. So that kind of shows you how what needs to be explaining variability. To the extent that there's a difference between the male and female line, I'm reducing the variation, or I'm explaining some variation in the rate of intercepts. And this is the same principle that we used when we learned about these kinds of models in the first place. It's just that my outcome is different now. It's a bunch of intercepts, one per participant, that I calculated in that first image.
We covered 4 and 5 of the chance effects.
Okay, so we've got 200 people, each of whom rates 40 behaviors on acceptability. Everybody rates every behavior, so we've got 40 scores per participant, 1 per behavior, and you could also think of it as having 200 people rating each behavior. And our model has just a rate of intercept for each participant and a fixed effect for how common the behavior is. So we're treating this as between simple variable. So, okay, that's the description of the problem. Based on that, what's one issue with how this model is equals?
Well, you're on 1 to 7 scales, but you didn't mean them, so the correlation might be really funky.
Yeah, I was not thinking of that, but absolutely, that's a great point. We learned that sometimes the correlation takes on odd values if we're not setting our variables. Yeah, great point. That correlation could be kind of tricky. Absolutely. What's one other issue with this model? There are quite a few of them.
The random effect structure is only controlling for the random intercepts and not random slopes.
Great. So what should we have written within the parentheses?
Comma, bar, participant.
Common, bar. Yeah, no, I got you. So we should have written parenthesis, common, bar, ID. What's another issue with this one? Yeah.
I don't know if this is what you're looking for. It didn't include the data frame or the optimizer.
Yeah, I suppose that, fair enough. Fair enough. I should have done that. I'll look something.
I don't know what else is wrong. That's all I got.
So the way I phrase this question, every participant rates every behavior. Every participant sees the same behaviors.
Oh, so there's no between subjects. No, yes, no.
Everybody rates the same behavior. So we could think of this as, we could have broken apart this data set into one chunk per behavior, and then did a little regression for each behavior to see, like, across all the people who rated this behavior, what's the relationship between how common they thought this behavior was and how acceptable they thought it was.
So you'd also have a plus common bar behavior.
How common they think the behaviors are can also vary within behavior, bar behavior. It's probably going to be behavior ID. So really this is a problem where everybody sees the same set of behaviors, the same set of items, they react to the same things. That means that's creating some dependency across the rows associated with a particular behavior. We probably ought to account for that in our model.
What do you mean by behavior ID? Like, what's that?
I'm imagining that we can give each behavior a particular ID, a particular number that indicates, oh, this is farting in public, or this is eating with your hands, or this is taking the bus. So each person probably reacts to a number of different behaviors. We can give that each behavior an ID to tell, oh, this set of rows belongs with this behavior.
Would there be a fixed effect of common?
Yeah, I imagine for this problem, I think it says that you're interested in the relationship between how common people think a given behavior is and how acceptable it is. You're not going to be calculating that average unless you would expect the row.
So common is some sort of other measurement scale.
Yep. If we think about what this data set ought to look like, we probably have a participant ID, a behavior ID, a column for common, and a column for acceptable. So participant 1 responded to behavior 1. They gave that behavior a 3 on common and a 3 on acceptable. They also responded to behavior 2. They gave that 4 and 4, all the way down to behavior 40. And participant 2 did the same thing. We got 200. Okay.
You just got an error message, number 5. Not familiar with that.
Yeah. At 5, I'm probably cool if you've done linear mixed effect modeling, just because it's not all that uncommon. You probably see messages like this. Remember, there are a series of steps that you can take to try to deal with these error messages that you can sort of rank by least intrusive to most intrusive. And we want to use things that are less intrusive. So what's one thing that we can do that's less intrusive? Behavior optimizer. Realism. What else?
Mean scenario predictor variable?
Mean scenario predictor. And we're dealing with this model up here. Actually, that goes back to your point that you could send this and the optimizer also be specified. Yeah, so that's pretty non-intrusive. Anything else?
Removes the correlation parameter?
Yeah, it's a little bit more invasive. Still, most people will think that's acceptable. Anything else?
Just fiddle with Elmer's options?
Yeah, you can change the number of iterations, so the optimizer, goes through, say, like 1,000 steps of jiggling the parameters a little bit, as well as combine the right ones that are to maximize the likelihood function. Sometimes if you change the number of iterations, it helps. I think that's the ones that come to mind. The biggest ones are probably centering your predictors and changing that time.
What was the correlation again?
Sorry.
What was on the correlation again?
You can remove the correlation, in other words, fix it to 0. And the way you do that is let's say we're working with common R ID. If you say common double R ID, the double bar means remove the correlation. Other questions?
Can we do number 6 for more things? Where 5 and 6 are just fine?
All right. Okay, so we're dealing with attractiveness ratings, and we find that if you take one person and give them a face to rate on attractiveness, do that on Tuesday, then you come back on Wednesday, give them that same rating or that same face to rate, the correlation between those ratings is about 0.7. So to you, does that, or to anybody, does that indicate that people are consistent with how they rate cases in terms of their attractiveness, or inconsistent? Consistent. The closer you get to 1, the more consistent the ratings are. In general, does a high degree of consistency in people's scores, does that give you a power benefit when you use a repeat measures design, or does that hurt your power, or does it not affect your power?
I'm really not sure, but I want to say that it could hurt your power because there's a lot of dependency. But for some reason, I'm thinking that in the slides that I saw that you want them. So you don't want a big difference in my scores.
Well, let's think about what you're doing when you use the design. So let's just say that you're getting 2 ratings per participant. One of the ratings is a hottie, and one of them is not a hottie. So you have faces that vary in their attractiveness. Very simple manipulation. You just want to see if hotties are rated more attractive than people who are not hotties across these 2 cases. So one way to think about this is you're taking different scores and analyzing different scores. You have the rating of the very attractive face and the rating of the less attractive face, and across a bunch of participants, you say, what's the average different score across these participants? Let's also say that people are pretty consistent with how they give their ratings. So what does it mean to have a high degree of consistency in terms of the rating effects? There's not much. So if you take the variability of the rating effects, actually, if people are consistent, it means that there's a lot of variability in the rating intercept. So think about that. If I'm really consistent with my ratings of a particular face, if I see face 1 and I give it a 7 on one day, and then face 2, and I give it, that means that I'll probably also give it a 7 on the second day. If I take another person, they give face 1 a 3. If their ratings are consistent, they'll give it a 3 on the second day. If I take the average across all these people, you can see like one person consistently gives all faces a high average score, another person consistently gives faces a low average score. So what this means is that you have a strong correlation between your time 1 rating and time 2 rating. That manifests itself as a large rating effect for the intercept. That also means that, remember, what we're analyzing is the difference from face 1 to face 2. So if I take the difference from face 1 to face 2, I'm subtracting out that my average score is. When I take 7 minus 7, that's subtracting out my individual tendency to rate faces as attractive versus less attractive. So this is another way to understand why you get the power benefit. When you use repeated measures of design, you're allowed, you treat every person as their own individual. That's one way of thinking about it. You compare every person to themselves, so you subtract out their average tendency to give faces like strong ratings or loss of traffic ratings. So getting back to the question, if there's a high degree of consistency across scores that every participant faces, that's a case where you might want to use a repeat conscious design because you can control for, subtract out that individual tendency before you end over.
So it goes lower, it'll be better not to do it.
Right. Actually, if there's no consistency between scores in terms of power, you're going to lose power if you analyze this as repeat measures. That was a supplemental reading that I gave you. If you're dealing with a case where everybody's just giving random scores, then just strictly in terms of power, you may not want to use repeat measures. So.
Just logistically, maybe you're gonna do the next, we're gonna do question 6.
Sure.
It's fine, I was just logistically wondering about when you're gonna post our take home, like obviously we're gonna in class Wednesday, but when will you post our take home?
Probably the same day, Friday, but I can try to post it sooner, just depends on what I'm able to do that. Yeah, I can try to post it sooner, for sure. But I will only on the stuff posted on Friday. Be the supplemental book. Any other questions? All right, well, I hope this was helpful. I'll see you on Wednesday. And if you want to say hello to Spot some more, feel free.
I guess I need to be credit whatever right now.
Since you're leaving this semester, we got you a card.
Thank you.
That's all the psych students that are in here, so we know you're leaving.
Thank you.
There's another one.